our storytelling event is funded by the Huffman Foundation. So much thanks to them for providing funds for this year and hopefully years to come. For Denver, you going first? Okay. First off, we have Denver Butson. He's a good friend of mine. He's an amazing poet. He's releasing his fourth book or fifth book?
Fifth or sixth.
His fifth or sixth book, depending upon how you feel about that. And his book launch is going to be October 11th. At what time?
7 o'clock.
7 p.m. at Jalopy. So if you have nothing to do that night, or if you do have something to do and want to cancel that and go to a book launch with live music and a bunch of guest poets, come down to Jalopy on October 11th, and Denver will be releasing his fifth or sixth book, depending upon how the wind blows. So put your hands together for Denver.
Thank you. Okay, so the story that I'm going to tell tonight is a story I've told many times, but I've never told it in the same way that I saw. Am I talking too loud?
No.
You're good.
Okay, so I've never told this story when I wasn't at a dinner party or at some kind of thing where I'm sitting next to somebody and there's a limited amount of time to tell it. So I've always told it for the wow factor of it, and there's quite a few moments of wow factor in the story, but I've never told it from a point of view of like how it affected me and what I was going through, because the wow factor points are so spread out through the story that I didn't have to, and there was no time to, because I felt like I was rushed. I didn't want to take up all the dinner time of telling the story. Now I have hours to tell the story tonight. I'm just kidding. No, and I can tell more. But as I was thinking about the story, I started. This is the meta part of the storytelling, which is gonna be even more meta because I'm calling it meta. So I started thinking about it. I started thinking, okay, I've only told the story as like point A to point B to point C to point D, and then there's wow. And everybody goes, wow, I can't believe that happened to you. That's incredible. But I started thinking about how I could tell this story and have some kind of more than just the wow factor of the facts, but just some kind of like personal realization and all these kind of things that people come to stories to hear. And then I realized that that's kind of, I don't really have time tonight to do that. So I'm going to front end the story by telling you that what I got out of this 25, not more than that, 35 years later, when thinking about it, is the realization that we're really not who we think we are. We're not who we think other people think we are. There's such a difference between our own perception of ourselves at the time. So that's all. I'm done. Thank you. Good night. No, I'm just kidding. So no, but that is like the realization that I had while thinking about this story as more than just a wow factor story. I also had the realization that this is an amazing thing that I'm about to tell you. And when I started going through it in my head, I realized more and more how amazing it is. So I'm going to give you some context first. It's 1977. I'm 12 years old. I live in rural Pennsylvania. My brother and my older brother and I are absolute rock music freaks, to the point that we started building our record collection a few years before. I had every Led Zeppelin record. He had every Kiss record. We had Yes records. We had Emerson, Lake and Palmer records. We hadn't quite caught on to the fact that there was other music starting to happen. Punk music was starting at this time. Punk was happening. New wave was just starting to hit. Disco, we thought it sucked. You know, like we wore shirts that said disco sucks. with marijuana leaves on them. So I'm 12 years old, and if you're, most people in this room will have some sense of this better than some people watching this or listening to this, if anybody's listening to this or watching this. No, but it was a different time then. 1977 is totally different as a 12-year-old than it is for a 12-year-old now. I would get on my bike and tell my mom, I'll be back. Where are you going? I'm going to so-and-so's house, or I'm going here, and that was it. Be back by 5 o'clock, that's supper time. There was no two ways about it. You know, there was no way she even knew where I was. She didn't call other moms. She didn't track my location on her non-existent iPhone. But another thing that I realized, my grandparents, my mother's parents were farmers. My dad was in the Navy. We were poor. I mean, really seriously, like lower middle class, lower class, working class, whatever the term for it is now. And what I realized as I was starting to piece together this story that I'm going to tell at some point, what I realized is that at this point in time, the only live music I had ever heard in my life was in church, where we barely went, Christmas and Easter, or if some music teacher brought an auto harp to school.
A what?
An auto harp, and played like folk songs like Midnight Special or Shall Be Coming Around the Mountain. I had never seen live rock music. I had never seen a band. I had never gone to a concert. So the year before, 6th grade, was a new school for me, new place. I just got bullied because I had long hair. I wanted to be a rock star, and I had a funny name. I got poked in the chest and called all kinds of names in school. And the only outlet I had besides music was this journal that I wrote in my 6th grade language arts class, where I wrote all about rock music. And not only about the rock music that I loved, but also the band that I was in, which didn't really exist. But I wrote all about it. I was the lead singer in this band. And so the teacher in the class, who was, he was a liberal, or I don't know what you would call him then, what people would call him then, but he identified as somebody different from everybody else because he had a beard, which, you know, all the others, nobody else in this teachers had a beard. He had a beard, so he was somewhat counterculture. He was my teacher, but he said, fold over the pages you don't want me to read, I won't read them. But he wrote check plus, or interesting idea. Oh, I'd love to hear your band someday, which didn't exist, the whole thing. Anyway, I go home for the summer. One day, this is the beginning of the actual story. It took me that long to get here. I go home for the summer, not go home, I'm just home for the summer. And I remember I was getting ready to go to the pool. I was in shorts, no shirt, no shoes. My bike was parked outside. The wall phone in the kitchen, the telephone rings. There's no answering machine. It's ringing before voicemail. I answer the phone. It's the voice of my middle school English teacher. And he says, this is probably inappropriate. I'm sorry to be calling you at home. And I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I know you're a big rock music fan. I just wanted to let you know that the band Yes is practicing in the middle school gym right now. So I went, can you say that again? He said it again. And I screamed for my brother, and I said, I don't know what's going on, but Yes is practicing in the middle school gym right now. We got on our bikes. I didn't put a shirt on. I didn't put shoes on. My brother was probably wearing Kiss makeup, and I don't even remember. And we rode as fast as we could down this broad street, through the park, up over the hill to the middle school, which is sitting in basically a field of cornfield. You know, it's the middle school and then corn as far as you can see. And the smell of manure is everywhere. We come around the corner of the gymnasium. This is the same gym where I played volleyball in school, where I played dodgeball, where the jocks who throw the ball as hard as they can at my stomach and laugh because I fall, because they think it's funny that the new kid with long hair is getting beat up or whatever. come around the corner, and there is Steve Howe, the guitarist in Yes, who I recognized from Cream magazine and Hit Parade magazine, standing there smoking in these felt pants that I could only describe as rock star pants or sixth grade girl sleepover pajama pants. They're purple and pilly and he looks lumpy underneath them. A leather vest with no shirt underneath, hair that looks like it caught on fire and someone just threw a blanket on it and put it out. And he looks at me and my brother, we must have looked like who are these aliens that just landed here? You know, I'm shirtless and shoeless. And he goes, well, you better come in before the bobbies come, the cops come, you better just come in. So we walk into the gymnasium and there's Rick Wakeman, Chris Squire, Alan White, well, I didn't see John Anderson yet. And they're all tuning up and then somebody says, okay, we're ready to go. And Steve Howe goes up on the stage and it's me and my brother, few stragglers around, and as we hear and my brother and I are absolutely just like, I mean, I've never even seen music live, and I'm 15 feet away from this. So this became the rest of my summer. They were there for 3 more weeks, I think, I don't know. Every single day, I would get on my bike. Well, okay, I'll tell a different part. I have to fill in. When John Anderson came out, the singer came out, he was wearing white drawstring cotton pants, which I happened to have because I wanted to be a rock star, and a white flowy shirt. So the next day when I went, instead of being barefoot and shirtless, I was in white because I wanted to fit in. So, and my hair was down to here, and I looked like, people mistook me for a girl they were like, oh, she should come, you know, whatever. That was very normal at the time. I was 11, 12. So that the rest of that summer, or the rest of those 3 weeks, it was me, Yes, their groupies, their roadies, a couple people would come and go, and my brother lasted 2 or 3 days, and I think he had a girlfriend, and he was like, okay, this is not interesting to her probably, so I'm not gonna bring her here. And I would just sit there, and they would run through this, and I would just sit there. It was me, and that. And so, okay, so I'm now gonna just back up for a second and say, oh, you're probably wondering, why is Yes in Amish country, Pennsylvania, in a cornfield practicing in a middle school? And I'll very, very quickly tell the story of that is that there were 2 brothers, not my brother and I, but 2 brothers, 30 years before us. We were actually, or 20 some years before we came through, we were actually in school with one of their daughters and one of their sons, who had money, some degree of money, and they asked their dad for a hi-fi system for Christmas, and their dad mistakenly gave them a PA system. And he was like, okay, I'll take it back. I'm sorry, I didn't know that you wanted a stereo. But they were like, no, we'll make it work. We'll figure something out. And it turns out that Frankie Valli's van broke down outside of the town on his way to Hershey Park. And they were in an electronics store at the right moment when somebody came in and said, does anybody have a PA system? And they said, we have a PA system. And they said, well, can we use it? And they said, yeah, but we have to run it. And they ran it. Flash forward now, if you watch any music videos, any music concert videos and see the Clare brothers name, they did the sound for Simon and Garfunkel's concert in the park. They did Queen, they did Yes, they did the Rolling Stones, they did everybody. So I don't even know how long I've been talking, but okay.
10 minutes.
10 minutes left?
Yeah.
Okay, wow, okay. Okay, so fast forward the next year, so that summer is just all, for me, it's all yes, that's those 3 weeks, it's all me and yes. The next summer, nobody knows. There are lots of people in the town who work for Clare Brothers, but they're sworn to secrecy. So nobody knows when, this is the first time any band has ever come to practice in the town. The next summer, a rumor starts flying around. Yes is coming back. They're playing at they're practicing in the elementary school because they're building a new stage. Well, so that day I was at the elementary school on my bike, probably in my flowing cotton clothes. And I go in and they're building this round stage that was one of the first of its kind for rock music, where the stage turned around and they had the curtains off of the side so you could see the technicians under the stage working on stuff. And I sat there, I think, for 3 or 4 days and almost nothing happened. I just watched them splicing wires, I watched them tuning guitars, I watched the setting up the drums, and then they said the stage is ready, let's go, and they do. And the stage starts spinning, and I'm sitting on a chair watching the stage start spinning, and I can see them like going, whoa, like it's moving. Chris Squire, who's like 6'4", like head back, almost falls off the stage. Okay, so then, so yes goes from the middle school, elementary school, and then they break up. I don't know if you know all this, and the Buggles, this is all whole different story. But so we start hearing a rumor that the Clare Brothers are building a warehouse. They're not building a warehouse, they're taking over a warehouse in town, an Old Spice warehouse or a tobacco warehouse or something. And so I think for 2 summers, I was just riding my bike past there, watching, listening, nothing. And one day, my brother and I would do separate rounds. I went past the warehouse. Oh, what happened? Oh, nothing. There's a couple bands there, nothing. And one day my brother goes, something's going on at the warehouse. Something's going on at the warehouse. And I was like, okay. So we go down, and this is the first of the disappointments, right? So we go down and we're expecting, we don't know what, yes, who knows? And we see the vans and they're unloading and we're getting all excited. We're ready. Yeah. At the time, we would have said we're ready to rock. And it's Air Supply. So and my brother and I both went, we said, who's here? And somebody said, oh, it's the guys from Air Supply. My brother and I went, all right, we get back on our bikes right away. But then a couple weeks later, Air Supply leaves, more activity. I go down to the warehouse, I'm riding my bike around, and I'm sitting outside and I hear, oh, shit. Yes. And I'm just like, okay, first of all, let me back up. It was not cool for rock and rollers like me and my brother to like Bruce Springsteen in Pennsylvania in the 70s, because all the New Jersey people who were 10 years older than us liked them. It was almost old people music for us at the time. But here they were. And there's Clarence Clemens coming out with still with his sax on, or still with his mouthpiece on, eating in the restaurant down the street from us, like that my friend Megan worked as a waitress. I think I mixed this part up, and I used to tell the story that Bruce Springsteen asked me to ride my bike. But actually, Trevor Horn from Yes asked me to ride my bike, who was when the Buggles, 2 guys from the Buggles joined Yes when it was completely falling apart. But Bruce Springsteen did ride my friend's bike around. He said, hey man, can I borrow your bike? And he rode around on the, So Bruce Springsteen stayed there for a while. And he also did the thing that Bruce Springsteen does, where he shows up with the entire band at a bar in the next town, the bigger town, and just says, hey, can we play? And they're like, yeah, of course. And it was the first time in the history of Lancaster County where the phone lines shut down. They actually shut the phone lines down because so many people were calling, you got to go down to the Village right now because Bruce Springsteen just took over the state. Okay, so I'm flashing through a couple things. So it's security gets tight around the warehouse. The Go-Go's come. somebody steals one of their guitars. And when that happens, suddenly it gets really tight and it's hard to get close. There's security. I mean, they're not security, but there's guys who are like, hey, you can't come in, you gotta stay out. So flash forward another, I think it's one more year. So this is 2 years later, 79. It seems like more to me, but it's only 2 years later. There's been a lot during the off season. And I go by and I see that there's also, they teamed up with a lighting guy named Michael Tate. And they were building the stages and the lighting. And I go by and I look and they're building something with light bulbs, all these hundreds of light bulbs. And I'm watching, I keep going by and I'm looking in, I'm seeing this thing get bigger every day, I'm seeing it bigger. And finally I realized that it's a crown made out of light bulbs. And I knew what it was. It was Queen. Queen was coming. They never came. They just built their stage there. But then later that season, my brother and I, who by this time started actually going to concerts, got tickets to see Queen, and it was totally dark stage. And then boom, that crown that I watched being built lit up the entire audience. Okay, now this is the conclusion because I skipped a lot of stuff. So, okay, now I realized this, I thought that I was 15 or 16 when this happened, but I was actually, the year before I went to college, so I was 17. Go-Go's, we used to say the Go-Go's ruined everything because their guitar was stolen. The Go-Go's ruined everything.
Not
But-
the guy that stole the guitar.
What's that?
Not the guy that stole the guitar.
Not the guy who, yeah. I mean, there were ads up, there were signs up all over town. Have you seen this guitar? I think they got it back in Philadelphia later. But so I'm 17, and during the day, I'm going past the warehouse, and it's getting less and less. There's fewer and fewer acts coming because we find out that Clare Brothers they're building their own space out in the cornfield somewhere, way away from the town. But there's less going on. And then one day I go by, and my brother says to me, I think there's something going on. It's bigger than ever. It's the biggest thing ever. And we keep talking about it. It's the biggest thing ever. There's more bands, there's more black cars, there's more security. And we're just like, what is it? What is it? We're so like, we're just pumped. But my brother's losing interest because he's into the Clash, and he's into XTC, and he's into, he's not that interested in thinking that it's going to be Asia, which I did see, another one that I skipped over, or thinking it's going to be the Buggles or something. So one night after dinner, I was about ready to give up. I was like, I'm giving up. I'm not going to do this anymore. Nobody's coming. It's all lighting. It's all stage. But I saw, I'm going to take one ride down. I ride past, and there was this energy coming out of the warehouse. You could feel it. The lights, the way the cars were parked, the black cars in the front, a couple guys with their headpieces standing. Did it go off? Okay. And so I ride past, and I stop on my bike, and there's this guy standing. He's got a headpiece, so it's, this is 83, so it's early days of headpieces, and a big walkie-talkie, and he goes, you got to keep moving, kid, you can't stay, you got to keep moving. I was like, shit. And I was like, I could see a stage, I could see instruments, I could see cymbals. So I ride my bike, I go around the block, I go up the hill, and I go across the stream. There's a little stream, and I go up to the railroad tracks, and I'm pushing my bike across the railroad tracks. And I can get the crickets. It's just that time of night where the crickets are starting, and it's that you still see mosquitoes every once in a while in the streetlights. And I have that energy. It's always that energy of right before I know what's going on. And then I'm just even with the warehouse right before the next road comes down to go right past the warehouse. And I'm paused. You can hear frogs, you can hear crickets, and then I hear this. And I about lost my mind. I mean, and I was pushing my bike on the railroad tracks, and it was going like this. And I get to the road, and I ride down, and I get to where the same guy's standing there, And he sees me, and I kept my bike back, and I stayed back. And then every time he would turn and look away, it was like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. I'd sneak up a little bit closer. And then finally, I was like right there looking in, and he goes, oh, just go. And so because I was shirtless and shoeless. What am I gonna do to anybody? So he goes, go ahead. So I go up and I move even closer, and they did. So I'm watching the Rolling Stones from Terrence is as close to me as Charlie Watts was on drugs, and he's looking right at me and laughing because he sees my face, and I'm just like, and he's doing. He always had a weird smile on his face, but he's laughing. And they went through Jumpin' Jack Flash for like 20 minutes. They played it over and over again. And then finally Keith said, good. And then he does. And then they did that for 20 minutes. And they did Street Fighting Man. Okay, so that's, okay. So this is the discovery. So the whole time with Yes, and then later, like the little nod from the security guy and everything, I felt like I'm in. But Yes, it was like at one point the musicians would talk to me when I came back to the elementary school. Rick Wakeman said, "Oh hey, peace sign." He tells me, "Hey," like because he recognized me from the year before. I felt like I'm a rock star. I'm a rock star, not yet a rock star. I'm like the temporarily embarrassed millionaire. I'm a temporarily embarrassed rock star. And so then I was going back through stuff, and I was thinking about it. And one day, at the very first time I went, the very first session, I'm going to the middle school. This guy came up and talked to me for a while. Turns out it was Donovan, which is I didn't even know who he was. I talked to him for a while, and then he walks away. He was also wearing flowing white clothes. I was in the club with him, and this other guy comes up and says, "Hey, do you know who you were just talking to?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "That was Donovan." And I said, "Oh wow." I said, "Mellow Yellow." He goes, "Yeah, Mellow Yellow." He goes, I'm from Cream Magazine." And he's, "So what's it?" And he talked to me for like a half hour. This is where everything came together for me when I thought about the story. There was a story about Yes practicing in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, but and it was all about, and there was one line in it that crushed me at the time, but it makes me laugh now. But it was, "And little Amish boys came and watched it." I was not the rock star that I thought I was. Okay, that's it. That's my story.
We're running a little late, so I'm gonna just quickly introduce you, Malcolm. Malcolm, I met Malcolm walking home from a middle school dance. And just overhearing him speak, I was like, "Oh, hey, you got to come to my storytelling event and tell a story." And he came and told a story with like pristine memory of baseball games that he had been to, and a story that he'd written about a baseball player that was just it hadn't made it to fruition yet, but just hearing the story was good enough for me to know that that story had been written. So without further ado, Malcolm.
Good evening, everybody. Terrence said the last time I was here to talk about baseball, and he said, "Can you come back and tell a reggae story?" So I don't know. I imagine some people are probably like, "Who wants to hear a reggae story from a white guy that grew up in the suburbs of Baltimore?" I know that's probably what I would be thinking. But a little bit about me. I worked 16 years in the reggae business. I'm in New York because of the reggae business. I grew up in Baltimore. Lived in Washington, D.C. for a decade or so. And when Terrence asked me to do this, I was like, where do you start? I don't even know where to start. I don't know what to talk about. So it's, when Olivia Newton-John died, it reminded me, I had this thing in my head, like Olivia Newton-John is the reason that I got into reggae. This is the craziest thing. 'Cause I was in 5th grade. It was just like, it must be 1980, 1981. We had the monkey bars at school. You know, we used to hang from the monkey bars. And we get one kid on one side, one kid on the other side, and then you climb towards each other. And we called it chicken fighting. When you get close enough, then you kick and you try to knock the other one down. So I guess when I was doing that, I'm humming that song. I don't know if this is like a music theme tonight. This is great. So I'm humming that song. The tide is high. The tide is high. I can't sing.
Yeah.
So I'm singing the song, and the kid that I'm competing with in the chicken fight starts going, "You love Olivia Newton-John. You love Olivia." And we almost got into a fight. And it wasn't until probably at least a decade later I learned it was Blondie. It wasn't even Olivia Newton-John. That's how Olivia Newton-John got me started. That song was originally written in 1967 by a group called the Paragons in Jamaica. That's the reggae connection to it all. So yeah, it's tough to describe how I got into reggae. I remember my family used to vacation in Ocean City, Maryland. Like a lot of people with nothing better to do, I would go to the arcade, and you pay your dime for skee ball, and you try to get it in the hole for points, and the tickets spit out and things like this. One day I'm in there in the arcade, and I hear this song, and I'm like, what is that? So I go up to the money changer guy, the guy who giving you your dollar to get your dimes and your quarters. And I'm like, what is that? And he looked like he had no idea. He's like, it's reggae. So for years, it's haunting me. What was that song? What was that song? By this point, I'm in high school. I remember it was the fall of 1986, and I'm starting to build a record collection. So I'm going out, and I'm just like, I'm gonna try to find that song. It's like, again, I'm a kid from the suburbs of Baltimore. I don't know. I go to the reggae section. I figure, how hard can it be? I see like 50 or 100 albums. I have no idea. So I bought a record. It was the Bob Marley Catch a Fire, which was the first record he did when he was signed to a major label. Still a group with Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer, and that wasn't it. So it wasn't the record I was looking for, but it kind of got me hooked, and it's puzzling. The music itself and the lyrics, it got me interested. So I went and I bought another reggae record, and magically, I think I got it on the second try. What the song was, if anyone wants to know, it was the Chuck Berry song Johnny Be Good. Peter Tosh had done a version of that. So I bought this live Peter Tosh record with his version of Johnny Be Good. So this is great. I found the song that I heard in the arcade. So at this point, I've got two reggae records. And so I'm getting a little more interested now. I'm sure I must have bought a third and a fourth. And then I start to get really interested, like the whole Rastafarian thing. These guys with the dreadlocks and smoking, and it's like, what is this all about? So it's like I went to the source. As you said, it was a different time back then. So it's like I didn't have the internet, I didn't have a phone. So I went to the library and I found like one book. The guy, I think his name was Leonard Barrett. He had gone to Jamaica to exactly answer this question, who are the Rastafarians? So I read this whole book, and it was kind of interesting, This is this time in my life. I'm like 16, 17 years old. I grew up, pretty stable family, nothing odd going on there. My mom sang in the church choir for like 38 years. I went to Sunday school and all that stuff. But I'll be honest with you, I was like a lot of kids my age. I was done with it. It's like church to me was just a bunch of old white people, basically. crazy with my questions and my eagerness, but he was patient and hung out. So I go to school for 4 years, and funny things happen, and once I'm exposed to this like college research library, I'm like having books sent in from interlibrary loan, and I'm reading the autobiography of Haile Selassie, the Emperor of Ethiopia, reading the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey, all these things I'm learning about the music, just to like deepen my education at the same time that I'm getting music. And one thing I remember is I had an AM radio show from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. That was the shift they gave me to play my reggae on the campus. And a guy, it was the Italian Cultural Club, hired me to DJ their party. And I mean, I think this is funny. I don't know if you think this is funny. They hired me to DJ this party. So I come out there and I'm DJing with cassettes, because this, it's still like 1989. So I play the first song. Of course, it's a reggae song. And I play the second song, and the guy runs up to me looking horrified. He's like, no, we need black music. And I was like, this is black music. And I was like, he thought I was playing Donna Summer and something along those lines. So I was quickly sent home. I don't think I was paid for my trouble. That's okay. I'm going through 4 years of college. I'm sure I'm skipping over a lot of things. What else did we used to do before the internet? I used to go to the record store, and there was a magazine called Beat. And I would always look for the Beat magazine. It was like the only magazine covering reggae. And then the Reggae Report came along later, and I was like couldn't wait for the new issue, because there's nowhere else to learn about this stuff. So in the back of the Beat, they had an ad for a record label, which is called Ross Records. I learned later that Ross was the real, authentic sound of Jamaica. And would you believe it? They had a Washington, D.C. P.O. box. I'm like, I'm at the University of Maryland. Ross Records is right there in D.C. I'm just like, I was like, I gotta find these guys. And I remember as I'm graduating, I write them a very serious letter, and I think I did my resume the way I was taught and sent it to them, and and then they open it up, and I get a call back like, yeah, come on in for an interview. So it's like, me learning as I go. I put on a suit and I put on a tie. I mean, I think it was a tie that had skulls on it and stuff. It was dressed in black and silver, but still, I'm in a tie and suit. And I walked in there, and they told me later, they thought I was a narc. They thought they did not want me in that place. But I remember they hired me. They gave me an internship, and my first assignment, I think, was like stuffing press releases in an envelope or something, and then they sent me home with some free CDs. And I was like the happiest guy in the world. So it's like I still feel sorry for my mom. She worked and put me through school and all this stuff, and I get out of college, and I took a job at the record label. They paid me $300 a week to pick orders, and it was like the greatest thing ever. It's like I look back now, and I'm like, I met everybody. I didn't even know who some of these guys were. Some of them I did, some of them I didn't. But I think for 6 years, I'm working there at Ross Records and learning the music. And it was just one of the coolest places to work. I mean, the Dr. Dredd ran the place. When I finally met Dr. Dredd, his real name is Gary Himmelfarb. He talks like this, and he's a dead ringer for Joe Torre. If you see Joe Torre's 1978 Topps baseball card, that looks like Dr. Dre. He's a cool guy, old reggae or old radio DJ himself. He had dropped out of school, went to Jamaica, and hiked the length of the island. Met one of the singers and told him, "Oh yeah, I love you. I want to put out a record." And the guy didn't believe him, so he started singing the song to him, this obscure song, and that was how the label started. So my first job out of college. It's working at this label, picking orders in the warehouse, and trying to think like a lot of the names, they might not mean anything to you, but while I was there with Bunny Wailer won a Grammy, we're a little independent label, and we won a Grammy, which was a pretty big deal. Gregory Isaacs, Yellow Man, those are some of the artists we had, but they actually moved some of the elders, the Rastafari faith, up from Jamaica. These were elderly men in the late 80s and 90s to record an album. It was for Ross, and they ended up, a lot of them staying in DC, and they would just hang around and come every day. So these guys, one in particular, an elder named Ross Speedo, became a good friend of mine, you know, and it's like, I look back now and I'm like, wow, that was like, you know, like being in the presence of a disciple or something along those lines. It just blows me away. I remember I was driving some of these waitresses. I had a friend who ran a Senegalese restaurant in DC, and I'm giving the waitresses a ride home, like 2, 3 in the morning. They've been on their feet all day. I'm sure they're exhausted. And I'm trying to get them home, and then I spot Ross Speedo walking on 16th Street in DC. It's like 2, 3 in the morning, and I made a U-turn like this, and I go back, and I'm like, sorry, we got to give this guy a ride. You know, they looked a little like, wait, you're gonna let this guy in the car? But it's like, you know, once you meet him, he was cool. Like, he was always the type. He was like, remember, he would always say, you pray for me, I'll pray for you. He's just a very humble guy. And ever since that night, every single time I saw him, he would reach in his sock, and he'll give me a little something. Like, he never forgot that. And I feel like I'm rambling at this point.
You got 5 minutes.
But this is what I was doing in Washington, DC for 6 years. And the record business started to kind of go kaput. Long story short, Dr. Dredd had the Bad Boys song, you know, from the Cops TV show. He had that before it got famous for that. So that like elevated him and the level to another label, but it's like sometimes you grow too fast, too soon, and that was kind of the thing that sank it. And he sold the whole distribution wing out to a guy in California and just made it more of a little like 2-3 person operation. So I'm losing my job, and I'm sitting there, and one of my good customers was set up here in New York on the East Village. He's like, you gotta come to New York, do this, you know. And it's like, at the time I was madly in love with this girl, and I was like, no, I don't want to leave her, you know. And I went down to Jamaica for a few months, and it's like, no, and I ended up taking this corporate real estate job, and I was absolutely, completely miserable, and I ended up working overnight shifts at a bookstore to save extra money. And then in 2000, I just quit. I was like, I'm coming to New York. So I came to New York, and it was right over there. They call it the Hells Angels block in the East Village. It was the Hells Angels headquarters. There were 3 record shops in the East Village Muse. They call it. It was an entire scene right there on the block. It was incredible. You know, now they say like people like me ruined New York, you know, because it just started to go turn right as I was arriving. But I got that little taste of what it was, what it used to be. And this was 2000, so literally like a year later, 9/11 happens, and then there was like a 9/11 for the music business, which was the internet. And you know, people are downloading music. I remember people walk by, they come in, oh, this is the coolest store, you gotta come see this, and they point at the records on the wall. When we get home, I'll burn this one. When we get to, I was like, thanks, man. I'm like, you know, the era of buying records was over. So it was kind of like a slow fizzle for like 8 years, but these were some of the best days of my life. I learned so much great music, met so many people. I'm not even talking just about like the musicians and famous people, but just like the people who are into it from literally from around the globe. I'm working at this shop. It was called Jammy Land, just a horrible name, right there on 3rd Street. You know, people would come in, and we have like a customer from France sitting on the steps. When we get there, he's like been saving his money for 2 years to come to New York and buy records from us, you know, things of that nature. So it was incredible. And when we learned that the combination of declining sales and rising rent was gonna like sink the store once and for all, I was really starting to stress like, what am I going to do with my life at this point? It's like 16 years of my life. I'm like, I don't know how to do anything else. Now I'm here, and I'm married at that point, and suddenly I have I've got a 2-year-old. So I was like, now I have real responsibilities. It's not, we don't have time for that story, but the story of how I came to New York, that was pretty, you know, irresponsible, a little advised, or whatever, but it's like, I don't regret it at all. It's 22 years ago. That's how I'm here. But when the store was closing, it's there was a guy, in a pretty big band who was a customer. And he heard that the store was closing, so he was kind of like, I've got some work for you. And just to like kind of tie it back with what we were talking about earlier tonight with the rock music, that was how I got to go on tour with Steely Dan for a year. And that paid my bills because Walter Becker was a big dub head, and he knew I was losing my job. So, yeah, he's not with us anymore, but I would always be grateful to him for that. And I guess this is sort of a happy ending. And these days I work for a company where I was hired by a guy whose band used to rehearse in the basement of the record store. And they were a band called the Slackers. They're backing a lot of classic Jamaican artists as well. And yeah, wow, talking out loud sometimes can help things make sense to you. So maybe it actually does come kind of full circle. And reflecting on that, this goes back probably not to Olivia Newton-John, but sometime in the 80s when I decided to like step into a different type of musical genre, which is something I recommend to everyone. There's a lot of good stuff out there. It certainly changed my life. Thank you for listening.
I'm sure as hell fucking glad I asked you to come back. Whew, that was so crazy, the kismet between the stories, by the way. The fact that you-
I know, it's very funny.
Well, talk about how music changed your life. I didn't. I did not. I did not know you were going to talk about music, and I asked you to talk about reggae, but anyways,